eerie atmosphere inside the shuttered hospital was thick with dread. The walls, which had formerly been spotless and hygienic, were now flaking and heavily dusted. The cautious footfall of the paranormal investigators caused the linoleum floors to groan. Their flashlights pierced the night, exposing a moment caught in time. The group of 4 people were equipped with cameras, audio recorders, and a mix of enthusiasm and apprehension. Their objective was to record any proof of paranormal activity that might still be present within the hospital's crumbling walls. They entered an unsettling calm as they continued along the maze, like tunnels. It was only interrupted by the distant sound of a wind blow shaking the windows and the faint echo of their own breathing. Knowing they weren't alone, the investigators exchanged uneasy glances. The unoccupied patient rooms appeared to be the source of whispering sounds. They heard faint, inaudible muttering that gave them chills. The sounds were elusive, vanishing just as quickly as they emerged, despite their best efforts to make out the words with their straining ears. The nurses' station, which served as the hospital's hub during its heyday, was reached by the crew. Papers with barely visible ink were scattered all over the place. They jumped as a door slammed shut suddenly. Their headlights illuminated the corridor, heading to the source as they turned to face the noise. A shadowy apparition with an ethereal and vague form appeared out of the shadows. It glided up the hallway with an uncanny ease, seemingly defying gravity. As they watched, the investigators' necks tightened and their hearts hammered in their chests. "Who's there?" One of them finally had the confidence to ask. "Deliver yourself." A frightening calm hung in the air as the figure appeared to stop for a time before disappearing into thin air. The incident didn't dissuade the detectives, and they continued their investigation by venturing further into the hospital's abandoned wings. They went into the operating room, a place where the delicate dance between life and death had just happened. The surgical tables served as unsettling reminders of the surgeries that had been performed, their surfaces marked with memories of the past. The temperature abruptly fell as they started taking pictures of the space, giving them a chill up and down their spines. They looked at each other in confusion as their breath turned to mist in the air. Then, from the darkness, a ghostly voice cried out, "Get out! Leave this place!" The words reverberated throughout the room, sending chills down their spines. They were terrified, but their curiosity kept them moving. They were committed to learning the truth. The mortuary was their final stop on their macabre tour, and they arrived there with their hearts racing. As they walked inside the darkly lit room with rows of empty body trays waiting for their occupants, the frigid air stuck to their skin. The trays started to shake abruptly, each one vibrating with an unknown force. The investigators stepped backward while recording the terrifying scene in front of them on video. The refrigeration unit's metal doors swung open to expose empty chambers that appeared to pulse with spectral energy. They caught a glimpse of a figure out of the corner of their eyes, a dark apparition hiding just beyond their line of sight. It scurried through the dishes, appearing and then going away like a phantom. The detectives were paralyzed by terror as their logical minds failed to make sense of the unbelievable. They aimed their cameras toward the object in a last-ditch effort to get a picture that would serve as proof. But all that appeared on the displays were distorted images, as though the very nature of the figure prevented accurate photographic capture. The investigators eventually followed the warning they had been given after becoming overwhelmed. With a heavy heart and a sense of defeat, they withdrew from the mortuary. The shadows that lingered in the hospital's abandoned corridors appeared to follow them as they departed, leaving an enduring imprint. The paranormal investigators had been profoundly affected by whispering voices, slamming doors, and mysterious forms prowling in the night. The haunting echoes of what they had seen will always be present in their memories as a reminder of the mysterious powers that exist outside of our knowledge. A group of 5 friends gathered in front of the fabled haunted mansion that towered over them as the sun started to drop. Those who dared to enter were chilled by the aura of dread emanating from its aged facade, which told tales of a gruesome history. The once grand mansion had been transformed into a jail for tortured spirits, who were imprisoned behind its walls and ravenous for retribution. A rush of chilly air greeted the Pales as they pulled open the squeaking front door, penetrating into their bones. Their flashlight's weak illumination revealed a dust-covered lobby, and the smell of rotting was pervasive. They were uneasy, but as they went deeper inside the house, their curiosity won out over their dread. The air became more stifling, and the echoes of the past became stronger with each step. The companions' footsteps resounded through the empty corridors as they upped the huge staircase, their hearts thumping in their chests. The walls were covered in shadows that swayed and twisted in unsettling shapes. The friends shivered uncontrollably when a chilly breeze suddenly rushed down the hallway. They noticed glimmers of ethereal entities darting in and out of view out of the corner of their eyes. The temperature dipped to an intense frost as the air became thick with evil. As one of the companions, Emily felt a chilly, clammy fingers brush over her arm. Fear tightened in their chests. Her voice broke the silence with a spine. Tingling scream. Despite their best efforts, the others who had hurried to her side were unable to comfort her. The spirits were craving more dread of the living after tasting it and becoming enraged. The gang split off frantically, trying to find a way out from under the vengeful spirit's control. Each individual member fumbled along the maze, like passageways, their footsteps resonating like a bell at a funeral. Their ears were filled with whispers that resonated and filled them with fear. Their cries were drowned out by the eerie silence of the haunted mansion as they called out to one another. The group's bravest member, John, became stuck in a tiny, dimly lighted space. Fading images of a long-forgotten family were displayed on the walls. As the temperature dropped even lower, the air became oppressively dense. He experienced two icy hands grabbing his shoulders and burning into his skin. He strained to escape the invisible forces that were imprisoning him as desperation tore at his chest. In the meantime, Sarah discovered herself in the cellar, surrounded by damaged home decor and the rotting remains of long-forgotten life. She was overcome by the smell of decay, and the sound of her racing heart overpowered the eerie murmurs. A worn-out journal with fragile, yellowed pages was found by her. The horrifying reality was revealed as she read through the entries. The house had once been the scene of horrific horrors, and the ghosts who haunted it sought retribution for their untimely deaths. The Pals struggled to escape the evil spirit's grasp as time appeared to stand still. Their screams mixed with the anguished cries of the imprisoned souls and reverberated down the passageways.
Shadows twisted and danced, fusing with the palpable gloom to engulf the house in a pitch-black void.
The house was suddenly flooded with a brilliant light as the clock struck midnight, seemingly ending all hope. The light enveloped the spirits' ethereal forms, bringing an end to their tortured existence as they moaned in agony. The whispers of the past vanished as the air became silent. The guys were once again outside the ghostly house, beaten and shaken. Their worn-out faces were bathed in the warm warmth of the rising morning sun. They were relieved to have escaped the terrifying experience as they took one final glance at the mansion that had kept them captive. The eerie home remained unmoving, bearing silent witness to the atrocities that had taken place within its walls. Its dark past would serve as a haunting reminder of the trapped spirits that were itching for vengeance, keeping its secrets concealed for all time. A chill would always run down the spines of anyone brave enough to approach, serving as a reminder that some horrors can never fully be forgotten. An antique store was tucked away in the shadows in the sleepy village of Willowbrook. The enigmatic treasures it contained were alluded to by its moniker, Whispering Curiosities, inside. Among the worn-out books, tarnished jewelry, and aged paintings was a doll that appeared benign, but was actually concealing something evil. The Clara doll featured a porcelain face that was permanently fixed in a menacing smile. Anyone who dared to enter the store appeared to be followed by her watery eyes. Children would make faces at her and shiver with dread as they passed, oblivious to the evil spirit that lived inside. Clara has a lengthy history and had been owned by numerous people. Nobody could keep her for very long, since they soon realized that she had a nasty side hidden beneath her lovely demeanor. She was allegedly seen moving around the room late at night, her joints softly creaking. Emily, one of Clara's prior owners, has first-hand knowledge of her frightful presence. The doll had captured her attention, and she had carried her home with the intention of displaying her in a glass case. But as the nights went on, Emily started to notice odd things happening. Whispers that appeared to travel on the wind were followed by footsteps that reverberated through the hallways. Her previously tranquil home now had an eerie feel to it, as if something sinister was waiting around every corner. Then there were the nightmares, scary ones that caused Emily to awaken, sweating and with her heart thumping. One evening, Emily's insatiable curiosity overcame her. She snuck downstairs with a flashlight in hand and a shaky hand because she could no longer ignore the unusual occurrences. She walked over to the glass cabinet and peered into Clara's eyes, which shone in the low light and stared back at her with a sinister intensity. Emily was shocked to see Clara's mouth move and hear a whispering sound come from her porcelain lips. The doll growled, "You shouldn't have taken me," in a vengeful tone. Clara pushed herself at Emily before Emily could respond, her razor-sharp porcelain fingers grabbing at her face. The doll bit and scratched, drawing blood with each furious assault as her strength belied her small stature. Emily struggled desperately to remove Clara, and with her heart racing with fear, she finally succeeded. She sought the assistance of Dr. Michael Hartley, a local expert in paranormal phenomena, with the doll secured inside a box. Dr. Hartley was intrigued by Emily's tale and agreed to look into the evil doll that seemed to have a consciousness of its own. The two were standing in front of Clara's imprisonment as night fell, and they were overcome with anticipation. Dr. Hartley cautiously unwrapped the box as he met Clara's hazy eyes. The doll didn't move, but the atmosphere was filled with an ominous force. To identify the origin of Clara's possession, Dr. Hartley started chanting an incantation. The doll's limbs started to spasm and twitch, and her eyes shone with an otherworldly light. The atmosphere surrounding them grew chilly as Clara's ominous voice erupted. It murmured hatred oozing from each word. "You cannot remove me. I never die." Dr. Hartley continued, regardless of the doll's warnings. The evil force inside Clara grew weaker with each incantation. The coldness of the chamber increased as the evil thing struggled to cling on, but in the end, it was defeated by the doctor's unyielding resolve. Dr. Hartley placed Clara in a safe case when she reverted to her immobile state so that she could never again torture someone. At least temporarily, the haunting doll had been silenced and her evil power restrained. With her flawless smile permanently hiding the horrible secret she held, Claire awaited her next unwary victim in the depths of whispering curiosities. And so, among those who dared to delve into the shadowy recesses of the earth, where good and evil danced an unholy waltz, the myth of the possessed doll persisted. An abandoned cemetery was located in the center of a long-gone town, tucked away in an old woodland. It had developed a reputation as a place to be feared over time. The night air was filled with whispered accounts of strange apparitions, luminous orbs, and uncanny groans. It was said that amid those sacred grounds, the deceased did not rest in peace. Few dared to step foot on that cursed planet, but those who did would be permanently haunted by the darkness they would encounter. According to legend, the cemetery once served as a tranquil resting place for the deceased. However, as the town grew and prospered, the cemetery lost its importance and was forgotten. The once calm graveyard then started to experience weird happenings. Samuel, a curious traveler, made the decision to look into the claims one beautiful night. He moved into the gloomy woodland with a flashlight and shaky confidence, his pulse thumping in his breast. Samuel persisted in his quest to learn the truth, despite the wind's menacing whispers that appeared to be urging him to turn around. A chill went down his spine as he entered the deserted cemetery grounds. Between the gravestones, shadows swirled and a foreboding mist hung thick in the air. Samuel slowly made his way across the rows of abandoned tombs, his footsteps echoing through the stillness. A figure appeared out of the mist at once. It was a woman with long black hair that flowed like a river of gloom, dressed in a torn white robe. She looked at Samuel with a mixture of love and grief, her eyes glowing with an ethereal brightness. The question, "Who are you?" Samuel stumbled, and his voice trembled. The ghostly woman's voice resounded all through the night. "Amelia here. We are the lost spirits imprisoned in this abandoned location. We hunger for freedom because our spirits have been unable to find peace." Samuel felt pity for the suffering people in front of him. How can he assist them in finding the rest they need? He inquired of Amelia. Amelia stated, "There is an old chapel beyond the graveyard. You'll discover an old book within. It is the key that unlocks our spirits." Samuel followed Amelia's instructions with increased vigor. The chapel was in the middle of the forest, its walls falling down and its deteriorating structure covered in ivy. The air thickened with an oppressive presence as he arrived. Samuel noticed a dusty book on an altar in the dim light. Its brittle, yellowed pages contained forgotten rituals and incantations. His voice was unsteady but determined as he started to read. A rush of energy entered the chapel as he said his final sentence, forcing the walls to quake. Samuel was surrounded by a brilliant light, and when it went away, he was back at the graveyard. He was shocked as the spectral representations of the wandering spirits emerged from their graves, their eyes now filled with appreciation. Their groans had been replaced by sighs of relief as they floated above the surface, bathed in an ethereal radiance. Samuel gazed in wonder as the ghosts slowly climbed toward the heavens and vanished into the night. Finally at peace, the cemetery had put its eerie past to rest. The abandoned graveyard changed into a peaceful location on that day. The graveyard used to make the locals afraid, but they now sought comfort there. The woodland that surrounded the cemetery grew lush and colorful, as though it had been given fresh life. As a result of his bravery and compassion, Samuel rose to become a beloved person in the community. But he was aware in his heart that the spirits themselves had led him, and he felt their appreciation. However, there are still tales that persist from the cemetery's gloomy history that are whispered in the wind, according to some on specific moonlit evenings. If you pay careful attention, you may be able to hear the faint echo of unearthly moans, which serve as a reminder of the ghosts that previously inhabited the abandoned cemetery. Will you dare to step foot on that awful earth, dear reader? Will you enter the deserted cemetery where the deceased are not allowed to rest in peace? Keep in mind that it is a place of both evil and salvation, a world where the distinction between the living and the dead is hazy, and a place where the souls of the forgotten strive to find eternal peace. A sense of dread pervaded the barren terrain as the wind howled through it. The abandoned building stood on the outskirts of a deserted town, its deteriorating exterior, a reminder of its former splendor. Its crumbling walls were said to be home to a demonic power that had moved in and was ensnaring the souls of those who ventured to enter. While few dared to approach the mansion, there were always those who were daring and sought the thrill of the unknown. One such band of intrepid explorers led by Emily arrived on a moonless night. They were oblivious of the danger that awaited them and were attracted to the mansion like moths to a flame. They were met by a suffocating darkness as soon as they entered. The smell of rot filled the air, and the weight of it made the floorboards quiver. Each one brought them closer to the center of the nightmare as they moved ahead, their footsteps booming down the deserted hallways. Their ears were rubbed by nasty and insulting whispers. Along the walls, shadows swirled, bending and twisting into grotesque shapes. Although Emily's heart was thumping, she kept her worry to herself.
She was adamant about finding the secrets concealed behind the house's oppressive grip.
The crew eventually discovered themselves stranded in a maze of identical, never-ending halls. As they stumbled around, losing their sense of direction, time appeared to have no significance.
Their courage was ebbing away with each passing second as panic set in.
The wicked force took pleasure in their helplessness and thrived as a parasite on their terror. It played on their most profound fears by whispering awful secrets into their thoughts. Suspicions and paranoia drove a wedge in the group, dividing it. The creature delighted in the havoc it had produced and thrived on their strife. In an effort to escape the nightmare, Emily struggled to maintain her mental stability. In an effort to piece together the murky past of the house, she put forgotten memory slivers together. Each revelation, however, came with a cost, a window into the depths of her own soul. Their agony seemed never-ending as the days passed into the next weeks and then months. The group's morale were crushed by the unrelenting suffering as they became emaciated and hollow-eyed. The once brave individuals had become nothing more than puppets, controlled by the evil whims of the creature. They fell victim to the darkness one by one, dissipating back into the abyss from which they had sprung. The only thing separating Emily from an eternity in hell was her will, and she was the last person left. She struggled against the entity's hold with every ounce of strength in order to prevent it from claiming her soul. Emily felt a spark of defiance burn in the depths of her grief. She came to the conclusion that facing the thing head-on was the only way to escape the nightmare. She mustered the confidence to move further into the house's interior as the darkness became closer to her. Finally, she approached the hideous and contorted form in front of the monster, which appeared to merge in with the darkness with no effort. Its voice was a shivering whisper in the void, and its eyes shone with an evil brightness. However, Emily was unfazed. She spoke old words of exile with a burst of will, words she had discovered in her unrelenting quest for knowledge. With each phrase, the entity's power waned as it writhed in anguish. Emily persisted, raising the volume of her voice with each chant. The thing was then expelled, ripped from the home, and dropped into the abyss from which it had come in a blinding burst of light. The nightmare vanished like a flimsy phantom, leaving Emily alone in the once dark home. The home slowly started to fall apart around her as she made her way back through the maze, like passages. Its entire structure had been infused with black energy, which vanished, leaving just a shell of what it had once been. With the weight of her ordeal on her heart, Emily left the house. She had defied the demonic force that had attempted to take her soul by facing the darkness head-on. She came out stronger, a survivor of a nightmare that few would ever fully comprehend, even though there were still scars. The house served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the perils that lingered in the darkness. However, Emily had triumphed, serving as a symbol of hope for anyone who would dare to confront their worst fears. Because the power of the human spirit may conquer and drive away even the most sinister nightmares in the face of actual evil. As twilight descended over the landscape, the sun started to set and created long shadows through the trees. Those who ventured close to the edge of the cursed forest felt uneasy as the air grew cooler. Its notoriety preceded it, with legends of the horrors that lurked inside being passed down from generation to generation. The woodland used to be a peaceful place, but something had changed. There were rumors that an old curse had returned to the country, wicking unexplainable animals. Those who ventured inside described bright eyes peeking out of the shadows, chilling growls, and a constant sense of being watched. A little cabin was standing among the gnarled trees, long abandoned and being slowly engulfed by nature. Legends about a family that had formerly resided there and perished at the hands of the forest's nefariousness whispered about its deteriorating walls. Some claimed that their ghosts continued to haunt the location, imprisoned in an unending state of suffering. The adjacent community became aware of a band of daring explorers who were looking for answers to the mystery of the cursed woodland. They gathered at the edge of the woodland, anxiously flicking their lamps in the growing darkness as they prepared to face their fears. The canopy of trees loomed overhead as they moved further into the woodland, obstructing the final rays of light. The once familiar sounds of the outside world vanished, to be replaced by an unsettling silence with only the crunching of leaves under their feet as a source of sound.
They were engulfed in a suffocating cloud of blackness.
The explorers stopped in their tracks when a low growl resounded through the foliage. In the distance, glowing eyeballs appeared and vanished like spectral apparitions. The gang began to feel uneasy, and their determination grew shaky.
But they understood there was no going back at this point.
The woodland around them seemed to come to life as they continued. The bent and deformed branches took on bizarre shapes that appeared to be reaching out to them. Uncanny murmurs with incomprehensible but hateful language swept against their ears. The explorers came across an old cemetery with weathered and worn gravestones. The temperature dropped and the air became heavier, as if the spirits of the dead were telling them to leave. However, their curiosity drove them forward and further into the shadows. They found the remains of the cursed family's cabin in a clearing. There was broken furniture all throughout the place, and the walls were covered with mysterious symbols. They were inspecting the cabin when a spectral figure appeared in front of them. It was a young girl, and sadness and desperation glistened in her eyes. She described the catastrophe that had befallen her family in a melancholy whisper. They were drawn to the forest by its promises of strength and wealth, but it eventually engulfed them and ensnared their spirits in its twisted grip.
She pleaded with the explorers to escape before the forest grabbed them as well, warning them of its ravenous appetite.
The gang was overcome by fear, but they remained resolute. They were aware that the curse needed to be broken in order to free the trapped souls from their unending suffering. They discovered an old relic buried deep within the jungle with the help of the girl. A bright light pierced the night as they raised the relic, driving out the evil that had pervaded the woodland for ages. When the cursed family's souls were finally released, the agonizing cries were replaced by a calm silence. The adventurers emerged from the forest, having been drastically altered by their terrifying ordeal. They brought with them the understanding that while certain horrors defy description, the human spirit can persevere even in the face of unfathomable darkness. The cursed woodland stood in silence as the sun's final rays dipped beneath the horizon, its secrets once more sealed away, waiting for another narrative to be told. The room was a hidden nook in the basement of a deserted estate, with only a few people aware of its existence. There were rumors that the area was home to a malicious energy that would make everyone who entered insane. As I stood in front of the door, its old wood creaking under the weight of long-forgotten years, curiosity and apprehension blended together. I pushed it open with a shaking hand, and as it swung inward, I was engulfed in darkness. Only the faraway sound of water trickling disturbed the eerie silence that hung thick in the air. The wallpaper was deteriorating, and a solitary flickering lamp hanging from the ceiling formed spooky shadows that swirled. I moved cautiously, my chest thumping with anxiety. I was surrounded by distorted, barely audible whispers that swarmed around me like an invisible bug swarm. Although I couldn't make out what was being said, the unsettling tone of the words made me shudder. Things started to move and change on their own as I walked further into the room. A vase shook on a dusty shelf before falling to the ground with a loud boom as a chair slid across the floor, scraping against the hardwood floorboards. I became increasingly overcome by a sensation of impending doom as the gloomy atmosphere grew thicker. I sensed a sinister spirit lurking in the space, one whose very presence might send shivers down anyone's spine. As the whispers became louder, their voices began to blend together and overlay one another in maddening cacophony. Darkness twisted and morphed into hideous forms that flickered in the low light. I turned to run, frantically trying to get away from this eerie location, but the doors slammed shut with an audible thud. I became terrified as soon as I understood I was stuck, just a pawn in this cruel game. The oppressive darkness made time seem to have no significance. As the environment played with my psyche, minutes seemed to last for hours and hours to become an eternity. The whispers developed into distinct, venomous, and hopeless words. They talked of long-forgotten transgressions, outdated customs, and heinous horrors hiding behind reality's curtain. I tried to cover my ears in an effort to block out the menacing sounds, but I was powerless to stop them from echoing in my head. The room's irregular shadows danced crazily as the flickering light grew stronger. I glimpsed brief glimpses of ugly and warped forms hiding in the corners in their eerie glow. They were visibly evil as they observed me with heartless eyes. Fear threatened to completely overtake me as it gnawed at my spirit. Then, as abruptly as it had started, the room went silent. The things stopped moving, the voices stopped, and the light maintained its flickering dance. A glimmer of light from the outer world was visible when the door cracked open. I crawled toward the doorway while trembling, eager to get out of this nightmare. The weight of the space left my shoulders as I walked out into the corridor, leaving just a lingering dread, with its sinister secrets concealed. The mansion appeared normal once more, but I was aware that the room's shadowy mystery would always linger there, waiting to capture anyone who ventured to enter. I would constantly be plagued by the recollection of that evening as a terrifying reminder of the evil that resides just beneath the surface of our world. The room would always be a haunting reminder of the strange and terrifying with its murmurs and flickering lights.